Liverpool 3, Newcastle 1, as goals from Diogo, Jota, Mohamaed Salah and a Trent Alexander-Arnold thunderbolt ensure Liverpool take all 3 points against the Magpies, who took the lead through former Red Jonjo Shelvey. Well, everyone, welcome to Debrief Live with myself, Patrick Smith, and of course, I'm joined by Matt Addison. Matt, how are you doing?
Yeah, really good. Enjoyed the Trent Alexander-Arnold goal, a moment of quality in a game that wasn't that great, if we're all being honest. But Liverpool got the job done. Chelsea didn't. I'm sure we'll touch on that in a second. And yeah, it was one of those games that you kind of get around this time of year. It's one where obviously Newcastle have made a couple of changes. They've decided to sit in. They get the early goal. It isn't really the greatest match, but the only important thing really is that Liverpool win. They get the 3 points, and that's what they've done. So yeah, I'm sure there's no complaints really from Liverpool fans. 8 straight games now that they've won since that defeat to West Ham. So it's been a really good response. There was a few decent performers, a few that were maybe below par, I would say. But yeah, overall, as long as Liverpool win, you can't really complain too much.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a bad win. 8 games on the bounce, but let's not be sugarcoating it. It really was a scrappy, proper December affair, wasn't it? What are your initial thoughts on the game in general?
Yeah, I think scrappy is a fair sort of word to describe it, to be honest. I think there was a few players that, as I say, were not anywhere near the best. I think Diogo is probably one of those, gave away a few strange passes and seemed to be, I don't know whether showboating is the right word, but almost just a little bit too relaxed at times. I think he gave the ball away a little bit too easily and gave Newcastle the opportunity really to counter-attack. So that wasn't great. He wasn't the only one that was below par. I think the reason really for that, and it's a hard one, isn't it? Obviously, we'll talk about the people who weren't there. I think Firmino for me is the biggest miss, just because I thought Ibrahim Konate did really well at the back. Liverpool didn't particularly miss Virgil van Dijk, but I think in that midfield they just looked a lot more open than what they have done of late. Obviously, Newcastle didn't have the quality really to really trouble them consistently and to pen them back for any period of time. But I think that the midfield with Fabinho does look a lot more solid. It looks, completely different to what it has been without him tonight. And I think that was a real sort of example again of why they probably need another player to play in that number 6 position when he's not there. But look, hopefully he's back soon-ish. We all know the sort of reasons why he's been missing tonight. So yeah, fingers crossed that it can be a return for him some point soon, because I think he does make a big difference to that midfield. And I don't necessarily think it wouldn't have been scrappy, had he been there, but I just think it would have been one where Liverpool could have maybe sustained that pressure a little bit more. It wasn't one where Newcastle had loads of chances, but yeah, I think he was certainly a big miss tonight.
Yeah, definitely was going to start with the 3 missed players. I think Fabinho is probably the one that's missed the most. We just needed someone to be on that midfield and, put a big challenge and get amongst it in a scrappy game, as I've said, like this. But in the midfield as well, on the opposition side, was Jonjo Shelvey, a former Liverpool player, and he opened the scoring with a pretty decent strike, Matt, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was an excellent goal, wasn't it? He does seem to have a knack of scoring against Liverpool. I remember he scored a couple for Swansea, didn't he, a few years ago? And I think that was, a much more competitive game than this one. But yeah, it was a surprise. I think it was a surprise to Newcastle, to be honest, that they'd scored. They didn't seem to know what to do. And yeah, it was one of those. I mean, you could tell right from the start the game plan. They'd obviously had Callum Wilson on the bench. They left Almiron on the bench. Alan St-Maximin was basically a one-man attack for most of the match. I mean, it was just a case of sit back, defend, and if they could keep it 0-0 for 75, 80 minutes, that would have been perfect for them to maybe go for it in the last few minutes of the game. But yeah, it's one of those. It was, I mean, you can understand why they've done it. It was relatively sensible, but on another day, if Liverpool play a little bit better, it just doesn't make too much of a difference. So yeah, fantastic goal from Shelvey, but ultimately it does feel like a long time ago, because plenty of Liverpool attacks happened after that moment.
Well, it was a bit of a freak goal, and I thought it was quite a shame we considered that, because I thought the defence were pretty solid tonight, especially in the absence of Virgil van Dijk. It's a shame they did concede. What do you think of the defence performance overall with Konate stepping in?
Yeah, I thought he was excellent, actually, defensively. Didn't really put a foot wrong, did he? He was really dominant. It's something we've kind of seen a fair bit from him against these kinds of teams. We saw him against Southampton, where I thought he was pretty decent earlier in the season. There was a couple of other games as well where he's played well. And I think that is a kind of a performance that kind of shows why Liverpool have bought him. I think you can tell that he's very much on the front foot. He's very quick. He's very strong, very good in the air, very good on the ball. I think Liverpool did miss Van Dijk's ability to just switch that ball from one side of the pitch to the other tonight at certain times. But defensively he was really, really good. And Newcastle did try and knock the ball over the top quite a few times, but if he didn't head it clear, then he was able to spin round and run after it and get hold of it. So yeah, it was probably a harder game than we probably give him credit for in terms of the opposition. Obviously, we mentioned before, Newcastle weren't particularly adventurous, but Alan Saint-Maximin can be a player that's difficult to get the ball off. But I think he just looked a yard quicker than him, to be honest, for most of that game. I know he was carrying an injury, he seemed to have a bandage over all parts of his body, Saint-Maximin, but I thought Konate did really well to sort of be front foot, as I mentioned, to sort of be in his face all of the time and win the ball back and be aggressive. So yeah, it was a really promising performance from him once again, and it's certainly promising. So, Virgil van Dijk is always going to be a miss, but as soon as you saw that it was Matip and Konate, you fancied Liverpool to get the better of it, and that's ultimately how it panned out. Well,
after that subdued, shaky start, we did eventually get the equaliser through Diogo Jota, but it was under somewhat controversial circumstances, do you think, Matt? Or do you think the goal should have stood?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I've not long come back in from the match, so I've not seen it back, but I believe that it wasn't really a head injury. I think he was maybe putting that on a little bit just to try and make Mike Dean make a decision. I think it was actually the assistant referee on the side of the pitch where I was sat, where he basically saw that it wasn't a head injury, told Mike Dean to play on, and Newcastle were quite clearly, annoyed by that. I think Eddie Howe in his post-match has said something along the lines of, my player was dazed for a few minutes, so why didn't Mike Dean stop the game? Well, if that was the case, then he shouldn't have been on the pitch for much longer after that, because, we all know the concussion protocols, and if he was that injured, then he shouldn't have come back onto the pitch, should he? So, yeah, I think there's maybe a bit of a question over for that, but yeah, I think it was ultimately good refereeing. I know that the Newcastle fans weren't particularly impressed with Mike Dean, but I don't think that was the worst game. I think he's just one of those referees that has got a bit of a reputation, hasn't he, for wanting to be centre of attention. So whenever there is a controversial thing, or whenever your team concedes a goal, I think it's one of those that maybe counts against him a little bit in that regard. So yeah, I think it was ultimately a good decision. I think it was the Newcastle player who injured him anyway, wasn't it? It wasn't like it was a foul from a Liverpool perspective or anything like that. So yeah, it wasn't particularly controversial ultimately, though. Even if it had have been disallowed, I think Liverpool still would have had enough to go on and win the game. So yeah, I can understand why they were annoyed, but it was it was one of those. I think it was the right call ultimately.
Yeah, as you said, I think Jota was actually onside regardless of the player on the ground. And it's one of those ones, had the ball gone out for a corner, I think the player would have sprung back up on his feet and definitely defended that. But then, of course, we got a second goal just a few minutes later. Mohamed Salah again, ridiculous numbers from this season, Matt, scoring yet again.
Yeah, just crazy, isn't it? I mean, it's become just the norm, really. He'd missed one with his right foot where he put it wide, and everyone around me was kind of going, "Oh, look, he's missed one," and that's kind of how it is now, isn't it? If he doesn't score, it's stranger than when he does. And yeah, look, it's just the consistency, the ability to just keep going. And to be honest, you go into these matches thinking that he's probably going to score one because he'll get chances against a team like Newcastle, and more often than not now he will find the back of the net with it. So yeah, it's got to the point where you can't really say anything new about him other than he scored again. I think it's 22 now for the season for him. I mean,
I believe so.
Yeah, he's got 44 in his first season, and you wouldn't be surprised if he gets something similar this season, which is just remarkable, isn't it? So yeah, it was a relatively quiet night for him. Was able to be taken off early, which I think is good given the number of games that Liverpool have got coming up. Well, hopefully, obviously we don't know exactly what's going to happen with a lot of postponements at the moment, but yeah, I think it was a sensible call to take him off. Relatively quiet, but one of those games where he finds the back of the net, Liverpool win. 2 reasons to put a smile on his face, I think.
We've got some very good habits developing at forwards, not necessarily playing well, but both Jota and Salah getting a goal, and of course winning ugly games. Very good habits to get into, Matt. But going to move on now to the midfield. Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, this time not playing in the false line, but playing in a number 10, number 8 role again. A bit of a disappointing performance, Matt, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those where I thought he was fairly similar to Thiago in that it just didn't quite happen for him. I think you'll probably put Sadio Mane in that category as well. It was just not necessarily a poor performance, but just a kind of didn't really do much, didn't particularly give the ball away too much, but didn't really do much when he had it in possession either. So, yeah, it was probably a missed opportunity. I thought Naby Keita, actually, when he came on, was pretty decent as well. Seemed to be able to keep hold of the ball under pressure and do one or two of the bits that Oxlade-Chamberlain didn't do. So, yeah, I wonder if there's maybe a bit of regret from Chamberlain that obviously he hasn't done it in the time that he's on the pitch. The person who's come on maybe has put in a better performance. So it's something to think about, really. I think, to be honest, I was slightly surprised that he played. Again, he's played a lot of football recently. I think he's played more last month, just, in November, than he did in the entirety of last season, I think. So, yeah, it's one of those where maybe there's a little bit of fatigue that comes into it. Maybe it's a time for him to drop out, but yeah, you're right. It wasn't a scintillating performance from him. I don't think he was particularly poor. It was just sort of middle of the road, really, which I suppose you could kind of put most Liverpool players in that category, to be honest, tonight. So not a big concern, but we are kind of getting to that point with him where it does need to be, a couple of months of good form, which might get him a new contract or might sort of put that back into people's minds. Because if he kind of continues as he has been this season for the rest of this campaign, I think, with 1 year left on his contract in the summer, there might be a few questions to be asked. So, yeah, it's one of those where it wasn't dreadful, but there does come a point where he's going to have to find some form. Otherwise, his Liverpool future could be in a little bit of doubt, I think.
Yeah, by no means terrible. He came back from the last international break. I thought he played very well for that couple of weeks or so. One of the best periods he's had in Liverpool shirt, in my opinion, but he's just sort of slightly off the pace now. But you also led me on to the next question very nicely. Good to see Naby Keita back again. He looked very dynamic, very with it again tonight, didn't he?
Yeah, I thought he was good. I thought it was probably a game that he could have started in, to be honest. I think, we're going to see a fair bit of him, injury permitting, over the next few weeks. So, yeah, it was a good performance. It was promising. It's a difficult game, I think, to come into and make an impact. Obviously, the game is pretty much done. It's just a case of keeping hold of the ball, making sure that you don't lose it in silly areas, which, to be fair, Diogo and Oxlade-Chamberlain had done at certain times earlier in the match. So in that regard, it was an improvement. So, yeah, it's good that Liverpool have got that depth. Obviously, we know Curtis Jones just about had come back and now he's out himself. So there's still a number of players really in there to sort of rotate, and even with a couple of absences, you don't particularly feel anymore that Liverpool are light. So, yeah, fingers crossed for him. He can continue to play like that. I think he had a really good start to the season, to be fair. So it's more a continuation of that than anything else. It's just really a case of can he stay fit? Can he be consistent? That's always the question mark with him, isn't it? It's never been about his quality. It's always been about his availability. So he's back for now, at least, and hopefully long may that continue.
Well, another player who's back as well, and probably one of the highlights of the night, Roberto Firmino, back in action once again. Good to see Bobby back, Matt.
Yeah, some really nice touches as well from him. I think there was a big cheer when he came onto the pitch. It's one of those where Liverpool haven't massively missed him, if we're all being honest. There's enough players, there's enough quality in there that the run of 8 wins obviously shows that Liverpool haven't missed him hugely, but I think just to have that extra option to be able to take Salah off and bring him on in future games, you can rotate between those players. You can even play all 4 of them if you're looking for a goal. I mean, it's just that extra level of quality, isn't it? The extra bit of depth, I think, is going to be huge, and it's perfect timing, isn't it, to get him a few minutes on the pitch. He looked sharp. He looked ready to go again on his first appearance back, which is promising. I think if he can get a couple more games before January, obviously we don't know yet exactly what is going to happen with AFCON, if it's going to happen at all. If it is going to happen, then when are Liverpool going to lose these players? But the fact that he's back, again, he's another one that has suffered a couple of times with a couple of separate hamstring injuries this season. So you don't want to play him too much and sort of do an overkill thing over the next few weeks. But at the same time, it's going to be really important, I think, to keep him fit, keep him playing well, and hopefully he can help bridge that Mohamed Salah and Sadio Mane gap. So, yeah, important minutes for him. I thought Diogo Jota did pretty well as well, to be fair. So it's not a case of needing to rush him back in order to put him straight back into the team. But, yeah, fantastic just to have the extra depth and extra quality available to Liverpool.
Yeah, weirdly getting quite a nice position with our squad depth through December. Actually, it's very nice seeing Bobby back. But Matt, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for today. Thank you very much for joining me, and thank you to everyone for listening. With Chelsea dropping points against Everton, thank you very much, Rafa Benitez. Liverpool are now 3 points clear in second place and just 1 point behind leaders Manchester City. Thank you all very much for watching the Debrief Live. And for now, it's goodbye.